Okay, next is Jade.
Thank you so much, Elsie. Can you hear me? No? I should speak louder. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Jane, for the lovely introduction, and thank you for the Vancouver Eco-Socialist Group for creating this space tonight. And to be honest, when I first saw the speaker list, I feel a little bit out of place among this sea of wisdom and experiences here, because I feel kind of like a baby in the work that we are doing. So I hope what I will share with you tonight can be a useful piece of the conversation and learning that we are going to have together tonight. And I want to acknowledge that all the dialogue and learning and the work that we do is on the unceded indigenous land belonging to the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish people. And I think it is really important that we not only hold this acknowledgement close to the work that we do as we continue to fight against different social issues in this city, but also as a settler of color who is part of the people with marginalized and colonized history, but at the same time benefit from the displacement of indigenous people and land, to continue examine and critically understand what this positionality means. At Chinatown Concern Group, we actually meet every Thursday morning at the Carnegie Community Center. And we usually start the meeting with some chants together. One of our favorites in English is, "The people united will never be defeated." And we also ask our seniors to do the land acknowledgement in Mandarin or in Cantonese, so that we can continue to reflect on how we can be in solidarity in our words and action with indigenous people and this land. And we are starting this conversation at the margin, away from the center, away from whiteness. And I want to reject that the margin is imposed by the oppressive structure, but rather the margin is actually a place of resistance, of celebration, of reconciliation, and also, to quote bell hooks, that the margin is radical openness and possibility. And this speaks to the long history and interaction and the need to revisit the common agreement and sharing between people of color and indigenous people on this land. And when I first was invited to participate in tonight's event, it was actually the first time I heard about the Vancouver Eco-Socialists. And I was really excited to hear about the group because, and their effort to link across social justice and environmental struggles. Because doing this kind of linking work actually has been a passion of mine and have been a part of my primary work in my studies and also within the educational sector and with teachers. Because I think by putting the issues in silos, we are actually, in fact, perpetuating the colonial paradigm and continue to divide people, and people from the natural world as well. And we need to acknowledge that social justice issue and ecological degradation are deeply rooted in the white, heteropatriarchal, and capitalist culture, and that is what we are fighting against. And for me, one of the ways to address this, it is for us to start paying critical attention to the place that we are situated in. To start paying attention to what are the intricacies of power relations in a place, what are the deeply lived experiences that are often marginalized in a particular place, and whose interpretation get to become the definition of a place. And today, I actually want to focus on one particular place in Vancouver, which is Chinatown, and how we are fighting against the creeping gentrification, or also known as what I call the colonial takeover, under the guise of "you can't stop progress." So a little bit about the Chinatown Action Group. So the group was formed in 2015 after supporting a series of mobilization led by the elderly Chinese residents of Chinatown Concern Group. They had gathered over 1,000 signatures for a petition that demanded a moratorium on all market development in Chinatown until the city held a community consultation with low-income residents. And what brought us together was both a personal connection to the place through our family, childhood experiences, and also a sense of injustice of what was happening to the low-income residents there. Those who have been to Chinatown lately, I think it's really easy to observe how gentrification is bringing a new class of wealthier residents, as well as values and lifestyle that centered around consumerism and individualism, the coffee shop, the boutique grocery stores, for example. But what drives this shift is the redevelopment of land to generate profit for developers and for the city. It is important to know that the gentrification that's happening in Chinatown right now is a continuation of the city's colonial legacy. This neighborhood was created out of racism and class oppression under capitalism a century and a half ago. And so we cannot separate Chinatown's history from what is happening right now. And that also means we cannot separate the fight for Chinatown from the fight against gentrification and displacement in other places. In Chinatown, out of 2,004 housing units that currently exist, more than 50% are condos and market rental units. And we demand that the city reject the new zoning plan for Chinatown, or what they are calling the plan is the Chinatown Economic Revitalization Action Plan, or what we call CRAP. Instead, we call on the implementation of a zoning plan for Chinatown that requires, first, a pause on new market rate developments in Chinatown until the number of social housing units at welfare pension rate in the neighborhood matches the current number of market rate housing units. And second, after this, 50% of the all new residential housing in Chinatown must be for social housing at welfare and pension rate. And if you live in Vancouver, I think you can easily observe or personally experience that we are going through a really dire housing crisis. Housing, more than ever, has become a commodity that only the richest in our society can afford. Yet Vancouver City Council is considering a new zoning plan for Chinatown that allows developers to build expensive condos without adding any social housings. We need to remind them that housing is our right. More expensive condos will only make gentrification worse, while doing nothing to meet overwhelming need for permanently affordable, quality housing in Chinatown. In Chinatown today, there are 2 condos for every social housing unit. In 2016 alone, 398 new market rate housing units opened up in Chinatown, but only 11 new units are at welfare and pension rate. Meanwhile, Chinatown's residents and businesses are facing rent increase, eviction, and displacement. But we are pushing back. Amongst our fight, perhaps some of you have been following, is the 105 Kiefer Street, where the class enemy, BD Development Group, applied to develop there 5 times, and we have defeated them 5 times. And while the struggle continues, because they have just decided to apply for an appeal, 105 Kiefer Street is not just about winning over the developer for me. But this particular struggle and our resistance is symbolic of what we stand for and what we need to continue to fight for. And here I want to share with you 4 points from my reflection. First, Chinatown is not a place of fixed stereotype of Chinese culture. Culture is lived. It's not some red paint on the building. Culture is when the youth and senior continue to practice respect and care towards each other. And it's when William hands eggplant that he planted in his garden after meetings. It's when we bicker over the rules of mahjong because the rules are just slightly different from depending on which region you're from, and we create our own rules. And also it's when the ladies get together and dance their heart out in any space they can find, such as the parking lot currently at 105 Kiefer Street before they fence it off. Second, we need to continue pushing for greater language accessibility. The fact that we have to provide our own interpreter at public hearings and get shushed when we are interpreting for the seniors reveals a deep institutionalized racism that runs this city. Third, we are reminded that our movement needs to be intersectional. In order for Chinatown to continue to be a place of safety and belonging for not only Chinese working class people, but for other marginalized people as well. Fourth, as an educator, I would say let's not forget the important work that is grassroots political education. I think education is an essential side to link struggle together. And to quote my good friend Lillian, that organizing is and should always be education. This is not only to unpack the process of gentrification and how that relates to other systems of oppression, but also it is to understand that we have a voice and we hold power and knowledge within ourselves. For example, in one of our Chinatown Concern Group meetings, we were actually having a discussion about capitalism with the seniors. And then we were giving an example, a really simplified example of a factory where workers gets paid, let's say, $10 an hour. And one of our seniors, Mrs. Liu, immediately raised her hand and say, "Oh, but if you're a Chinese worker, you get paid $8 an hour." She immediately reminded us that we cannot separate class and race. And that is why Chinatown residents and organization actually have created the People's Vision for Chinatown to ensure that the neighborhood remain permanently affordable and welcoming to seniors, workers, and low-income people of all backgrounds. The People's Vision of Chinatown, for Chinatown is actually coming out of 2 years of survey, door knocking, visitings, holding different groups and tea times. And it's a strategy for social and economic development. It is a community response to the affordability crisis caused by gentrification that represent the hope, desire, and self-determination of working-class residents in the community. The People's Vision calls for truly affordable housing, culturally appropriate retail, accessible community space, democratic decision-making, neighborhood safety, and better health and social service for seniors and low-income people. I encourage you to take a look at the People's Vision for Chinatown. I actually brought some flyers if you want to take a look, and it's also available online as well. So to close, I want to quote one of our organizers, Stephanie Fun. She said that, "We don't empower people because people already have power. They don't need us to liberate them from anything. Instead, we move each other to take action. We move each other to build capacity, to use our power to change the material conditions of our lives." So let us keep moving each other. Thank you.